He was not a soldier. He had never handled anything more dangerous than a kitchen knife. He knew no military protocol, had no combat training, and had never killed a single living creature in his 43 years of life. But on the day that alien hands touched his daughter, 3 alien empires learned what humanity had always known and silently kept as its most terrible secret. There are things more terrible than armies, more terrible than fleets, more terrible than the gods of war flying between the stars. And one of them is an ordinary father who has nothing more to lose. Stay until the end, because what happened on the Aurora 9 station, that day will be retold on dozens of planets for 1,000 years to come. And each time, the storytellers will lower their voices at the same point, where a man who had never been a soldier ceased to be human in the conventional sense of the word, and became something for which foreign languages simply had no name. His name was Ethan Grow, life support engineer, widower, father. Aurora 9 station was a small world unto itself, a frontier outpost on the edge of human space, where humans and representatives of 3 allied alien races live side by side in a fragile but functioning world. Ethan moved here 4 years ago after losing his wife in a shuttle accident. He took with him the only thing that mattered in his life, his 6-year-old daughter, Mila. Mila was a quiet child, sober beyond her years, with a habit of drawing stars on every scrap of paper she could get her hands on. She didn't remember her mother. She remembered only her father, his hands smelling of machine oil, his voice reading bedtime stories, his promise, repeated every night, "I'll always be here, no matter what." Ethan worked in the station's maintenance bays, servicing the systems that transformed the frigid vacuum of space into habitable air. It wasn't heroic work. It was work that no one noticed until it stopped working. He was an ordinary man in an extraordinary place. And 3 years on Aurora 9 passed peacefully as to be on the edge of established space, where pirate ships, slavers, and scavengers occasionally passed by the station, searching for a weak spot in the outpost defenses. Ethan didn't think about that. He thought about whether he'd have time to pick Mila up from school before the end of his shift. He thought about her birthday in 2 weeks. He thought about the 1,000 little, ordinary things that make up the life of a single father raising a child on the edge of the known universe. He didn't think about the fact that somewhere out there, in the darkness between the stars, a ship of Skyrat slavers was approaching. Creatures whose economy was built on kidnapping intelligent children of all species for sale on the black market to the outer sectors, where a child's mind was valued above gold for its ability to learn combat implants at a young, malleable age. He didn't know that Aurora 9 hadn't been chosen as a target by chance. Weak defenses, a small garrison, and, most importantly for the slavers, an open school where 40 children of all the station's sentient species gathered daily. The attack began at 2:32 p.m. station time on Thursday, a perfectly normal day of the week. 3 Skyrat ships emerged from stealth jump just outside the station's outer perimeter, bypassing Aurora 9's outdated sensors as easily as if they didn't exist. Their plasma cannons struck the station's sole defense tower before the garrison could even raise the alarm. Ethan was in the Level 3 maintenance bay when sirens blared throughout the station, a sharp, mind-shattering wail of an emergency alarm he'd only heard before in training exercises. The first thought that pierced his mind through the panic was one. "Mila, the school is on Level 5, right where the invaders' guns are hitting." He dropped his tools and ran. The station's corridors were in chaos. People were running in all directions, unsure of where to go. The emergency lights flickered red, casting jagged shadows on the walls. Explosions could be heard in the distance, methodical, measured, as if someone was purposefully breaking through the station's defenses, knowing exactly where to go. Ethan pushed through the crowd of terrified civilians, ignoring the guards' cries for everyone to take shelter. Shelters didn't matter. Nothing mattered except one thought, beating in his head like a second heart. "Mila, I need to get to Mila." He reached the school bay in 9 minutes. 9 minutes that seemed longer than his entire past life. And he saw something that turned an ordinary engineer into something for which the Skyrat language simply had no word. The door to the school bay was shattered. Chaos reigned inside. Overturned desks, scattered children's drawings, among which Ethan recognized his daughter's familiar handwriting on a scrap of paper lying just by the threshold. It had a star drawn on it. 3 Skyrat creatures, tall, scaly, with numerous limbs ending in grasping pincers, methodically herded the terrified children into a transport capsule designed to carry cargo. Not prisoners. Cargo. The class's teacher, a young woman named Sarah Kim, lay unconscious against the wall. She had tried to protect the children and paid for it with a blow that left a bloody mark on the metal floor. And in the center of the room, caught in the claw of the largest of the invaders, hung in the air a 6-year-old girl with disheveled dark hair. Mila. She didn't scream. She was too terrified even to scream, her small body frozen in shock, her eyes wide, her lips trembling in a silent plea to the void. The creature holding her turned its head towards its companions and said something in a sharp, clicking language, which Ethan's translator implanted in his auditory nerve when he moved to the border outpost, translated automatically. This specimen is superb. A young human mind. A quick learner. The price on the extreme sector's market will be exceptional. Something inside Ethan Grow broke in that moment, and in its place, something else was born. Later, when surviving witnesses of the attack try to describe what happened next, each will use different words. Some will say they saw an ordinary man suddenly transform into something inhuman. Others will say they saw a father who simply refused to exist in a world where his child was being taken away before his very eyes. The truth was simpler and more terrible at the same time. Ethan Grow was unarmed. He had no combat training. He had nothing but his bare hands, a chest aching with terror, and the absolute, crystal-clear determination that only comes when a person realizes they have nothing left to lose. He didn't shout. He didn't warn. He didn't give the invaders a chance to react to the threat. He simply lunged forward, with a speed that would later surprise even military experts studying the station's security footage, and slammed into the nearest Skyrat with a force his body should not have been able to physically produce. The creature, twice the weight of a man and protected by natural chitinous armor, flew backward from the impact, as if hit by a transport car. Ethan didn't stop to assess the effect. His hands had already found the neck of the next invader, the one clutching scattered children's drawings in its claw, ready to confiscate them as incidental cargo. What happened next wasn't a battle in the conventional sense. It was pure, unstoppable destruction, directed toward a single goal, getting the child back. Ethan felt no pain as the second Skyrat's claw ripped his shoulder to the bone. He didn't feel the blood pouring down his arm as he clawed at the creature's eyes with bare fingers, a strength born of sheer desperation. He didn't think about his own life, his own safety, or the fact that any reasonable person in his place would have retreated, hidden, and awaited the garrison's aid. He thought of only one thing. Mila looks at me. Mila sees me. I can't let her see me give up. The second Skyrat collapsed with a shattered trachea. Ethan turned to the third creature, the one still clutching his daughter in its claw, and for a split second their gazes met. Something flashed in the eyes of the alien slaver, a creature that had seen hundreds of abductions, thousands of frightened children from all species of the universe, that Ethan would later call the only word that could describe this feeling: fear. For the first time in his long career as a child abductor, Skyrat encountered a creature that frightened him more than he could frighten anyone else. "Let her go," Ethan said. His voice was calm, utterly, terrifyingly calm, despite the blood trickling down his torn arm, despite the pain tearing through every nerve in his body. Translator Skyrat clicked, relaying the words to the creature in its native tongue. The invader took a step back, tightening its claw around Mila's body, as if the child could serve as a shield from whatever stood before it. "You're unarmed." The creature croaked through its own translator, its voice trembling with confusion. "You don't have a weapon. You're not a soldier. Our data on your species indicates that civilians pose no threat in combat situations." Ethan took a step forward, blood dripping from his fingertips onto the metal floor. "Your information was wrong," he said quietly. "You never met your father." Skyrat took another step back, toward the wall of the compartment, pressing Mila closer to him in a desperate attempt to use her as a last lever of pressure. "I'll kill her. One more step, and I'll kill her right now." Something changed in Ethan's face at that moment. Not anger, not panic. Something deeper and more terrifying. The absolute, icy certainty of a being who had calculated every possible outcome of the situation and made a decision from which he would not back down. "If you harm her," Ethan said, his voice even, terrifying its calm. "I will tear you apart with my bare hands, so slowly that your kind will tell this story to their children for 1,000 years as a warning. But if you let her go now, right now, I promise you a swift death instead of the one you deserve." Mila, still trapped in the creature's claw, suddenly did something no one expected. She stopped shaking. She looked up at her father, at his bloodied face, at his torn shoulder, at his eyes filled with absolute determination to protect her at any cost. And in that look she found what every frightened child in the history of the universe, trapped in the hands of monsters, had sought: the certainty that Dad has come. And Dad won't leave without her. "Dad," she whispered barely audibly, "I knew you'd come." Those 3 words broke the last thread of Ethan Gross restraint. Skyrat, sensing the change in the air of the room, a change his predatory instincts had recognized a second before it happened, tried to retreat toward the broken door of the compartment, still holding Mila hostage. He didn't have time to take even 2 steps. Ethan closed the distance between them faster than the creature could react. His hand, the same hand that read bedtime stories, repaired the station's life support systems, stroked the head of a crying child after nightmares, grabbed the invader's claw with force that tore through chitin as if it were made of paper. Skyra howled in pain, instinctively releasing his grip. Mila fell. But Ethan was already there, catching her fall with his free hand before she hit the floor, pressing her to his bloodied chest with the desperate tenderness of a man who had just regained his purpose in life. "Run to the teacher," he whispered in her ear, his voice trembling for the first time in the entire fight. Not from fear, but from relief too vast to contain. "Run now, little one. Daddy will finish here." Mila, still in shock but no longer paralyzed with terror, nodded and rushed to Sarah Kim, who was beginning to regain consciousness near the wall of the compartment. Ethan turned to face the remaining Skyrat, the creature that had just lost its only defense and now stood before its enraged father with bare, bloody hands that left no doubt about what would happen next. The station security guards, bursting into the compartment with their weapons drawn, only caught a partial glimpse of what happened in the next 30 seconds. Security camera footage will reveal the rest, and these recordings will become some of the most widely viewed in all of human space, spreading across the internet as a symbol of something everyone felt within themselves but had never seen embodied so literally. Ethan Grow, a life support engineer, a widower, the father of a 6-year-old girl who had never before laid a hand on another living being, beat the last invader to death with his bare hands in the middle of a destroyed schoolroom among scattered children's drawings of stars, under the flashing red light of an emergency alarm. When security finally burst into the compartment, they found Ethan kneeling in the rubble of blood, his own and others, covering every inch of his body, his hands clutching the fragile body of his daughter, pressed against his bloodied chest. He cried, not from pain, but from relief so immense that it seemed physically impossible for a human body to contain it. "She's alive," he whispered over and over again, as if trying to convince himself of the reality of what was happening. "She's alive. She's alive." The attack on the Aurora 9 station was repelled that same day. The remaining Skyrat ships, having seen the abduction operation fail and the loss of the entire assault group, retreated in panic, unwilling to risk further losses against an outpost whose defenses suddenly turned out to be far more formidable than their intelligence had indicated. But the story didn't end there. Security footage from the school bay leaked onto the Galactic network within a week. First as military intelligence for Skyrat's tactical analysis, then, inexplicably, as viral content that spread to every corner of known space. Other races, allied and neutral, looked at the images of an unarmed man tearing apart armed kidnappers with his bare hands to save one child and experience a feeling for which most alien languages simply had no accurate translation. Not fear, not pure admiration. Something in between, a deep, unsettling realization that a species they had long considered technologically weak possessed within itself a reserve of such absolute, boundless fury that even advanced martial races would prefer never to experience it firsthand. Skyrat, whose economy had been built for centuries on the abduction of children from defenseless species, issued an official decree for the first time in its history, which reached Earth diplomats through intermediaries 2 months after the incident. A decree prohibiting any abduction operations in the territory where human families live. The wording of the decree was short, almost laconic, but its meaning spread throughout the galaxy faster than any military report. The risk doesn't justify the potential reward. Human parents pose a threat beyond standard combat calculations. Ethan Grove spent 3 weeks in the station's hospital, recovering from wounds that nearly cost him his life. Doctors would later tell him his body had sustained damage beyond his ability to survive without immediate surgery. But somehow, he held on until he was certain Mila was safe. When he finally came to enough to speak coherently, the first thing he asked was her name. Mila sat by his bedside every day from the moment the doctors allowed visits. She held his healthy hand for hours, drawing stars on the paper the nurses brought her, unable to refuse the girl whose father had become a station legend overnight. "Dad," she said one day when he was finally able to sit up unaided, "you were so scary that day." Ethan looked at his daughter with a long, heavy gaze. "I'm sorry about that, baby," he said quietly. "I didn't mean for you to see me like this." Mila shook her head with a seriousness that only children who had experienced something no child should ever have to experience. "No," she said, "you were scary to them. Not to me. To me, you were just a dad who came over." She handed him a piece of paper with a star drawn on it. But this time, next to the star stood a small figure holding the hand of an even smaller figure, both surrounded by a crooked but recognizable heart. "It's us," she said simply, "because you always come. You promised." Ethan took the drawing with a trembling hand, feeling a lump in his throat, more like all the grief he had experienced in recent years than the joy of this moment. "Always," he whispered. "No matter what, baby, always." Years passed. Ethan Grove's story became part of the folklore of the outposts, a tale whispered by parents in the bars of distant outposts, a story cited by diplomats when discussing why no race in the universe, no matter how technologically advanced, ever risked directly provoking conflict with human families, not because humans were the strongest, not because their weapons were the most advanced, because somewhere deep within human nature there lived a spark that millennia of evolution, wars, and survival on a harsh planet had forged into something unmatched among the stars. The ability of a father, a mother, any person who loves someone more than their own life, to turn into an absolute, unstoppable force at the moment when that love is threatened. Ethan Grove wasn't a soldier. He never wanted to be one. He remained a life support engineer for the rest of his career, raising a daughter who grew up to become a long-range naval pilot herself, inheriting from her father not rage, but something more important, an unshakable conviction that love, taken to its extreme, can stop entire empires. Every time someone on the distant outpost of humanity asked the old engineer how he managed to do what he did that day on the Aurora 9, Ethan answered the same way, looking into the distance, as if he could see that very room, that very fear, that very rage before him again. "I didn't do anything special," he said quietly. "Any father in my place would have done the same. It's just that few get the chance to prove it. And perhaps it was precisely in the simple truth that humanity's most terrible secret lay, one that the entire galaxy learned too late. Not in weapons, not in technology, not in the military might of fleets. It's that somewhere in every human heart, something ancient and absolute slumbers, a power born not of anger, but of love pushed to its ultimate limit, a power that cannot be predicted, impossible to calculate, impossible to stop, and woe to the one who awakens her, touching what a person loves more than his own life, and